The last video I did was about the United States because there's a lot of news coming out about America. But America's little brother, Canada, is where I'm from, and people want to know what is going on in Canada. So let's go to the first slide. The first slide is about the War of 1812. I'm going to read through the article first, and then we'll go over the words and more explanation. The most pivotal point in Canadian history started in 1812 and lasted until 1815. Dissension between the British Empire and the United States resulted in war over territory and treatment of natives. Privateers were used to fight from ships. They did not work for the government. They were authorized to fight for their country. The Canadians are most proud of their most torrid accomplishment, burning the United States Capitol. And I've got a picture here of some sheep saying bighorn sheep did not participate in the war, although they might have got shot for food. Pivotal just means creating change or importance. It's like a point in time where something changes, something important happens. So, for example, a pivotal moment in history was the discovery of oil in Alberta. So, when they discovered oil in about 1850 approximately, they were able to create the wealthiest province in the country from extracting the oil, which was it was really shallow. It was only about 50 feet down, and they could just drill. They actually didn't drill. They actually would just dig a hole in the ground and then suck the oil out, or actually it would just explode out basically. But now they have to go down 50,000 feet offshore and stuff. But anyway, the Prime Minister pivots his foot in a dance to impress voters. What I'm saying here is you're moving your foot back and forth like a dance. Here is the next example. The most pivotal part of the movie was when the man fell down the Niagara Falls. So there's a lot of movies about Niagara Falls. There's a lot of news where people try to go down in a barrel and they end up dying, or they do survive but they get arrested because it's illegal. So here's the hotel, the Banff Springs Hotel, and it's expensive to stay there, like $500 a night, but it was actually sold to Fairmont Hotels Incorporated. And the way I use the word pivotal here is to say the sale of the Banff Springs Hotel to Fairmont Hotels Incorporated was pivotal to unlocking value. Unlocking value when you have something like this really just means to sell it or to make it seem like it's more valuable. The next slide is about dissension. Dissension means to strongly disagree in opinion. So for example, let's say my friend says, "Oh man, we should cut down all these trees and we should build a big house." And I say, "No, why don't we just leave the trees and you should not have a big house?" Then we strongly disagree in opinion. The first example is Canadians are dissident with regards to American gun laws. The United States had the Constitution. I say had the Constitution because nobody follows the Constitution anymore. But when they had it, they created amendments to the Constitution, like additions. And one of them is that you have the right to bear arms, the right to have a gun. Canadians don't like guns, Americans love guns, so they're dissident. They disagree. Great dissension among Canadians surround the topic of health care. Canadians want the government to have running all the health care. Americans do not want the government to run the health care. So we disagree on health care and disagree on guns. Sorry about the scooter in the background. It's a noisy street I live on, so I can't avoid all this background noise unless I were to go way up in the mountain, but I don't want to go all the way to the mountain just to make a video, so we're going to have a little background noise. Anyway, the dissension between American and Canadian people motivated the construction of the Trans-Canada Railroad. So Americans and Canadians were disagreeing on who owns British Columbia, which is my province, that looks like this. And they decided to build a railroad, a big train system all the way across to draw a line as to where Canada is. Another hot topic is the export of fresh water creates dissension among environmentalists. We could take lots of this water and we could just like fill ships with the water and sell it to countries that do not have much water. For example, Korea, China, France, Vietnam. These countries could buy water and it would be perfectly clean, and every year the water is going to come down, but people say, oh, we can't do that because the water, it'll stop going or something. But really it's just going to go to the sea anyway and just get wasted, so I figure we might as well just take some of it and sell it. And I think when things get really bad, we're going to see countries get desperate for money. Like Saudi Arabia is going to have to import water like this, and where is it going to come from? It could come from Canada, maybe it could come from Ireland, I don't know, Sweden, wherever. The word treatment really has three uses. The first one is for how you interact with others. For example, Ben treats John with respect. If Ben thinks John is a good guy, so he treats him well, he's nice to him, that's how he interacts with him. He treats him with respect. The second one is changing chemicals. For example, the treatment of ethylene gas with a catalyst produces plastic. That's when you take a chemical and you put it on something to change it. For example, if you were to put bleach or any kind of whitening product on this deer, he would go a white color. So you'd be saying, I treated the deer with bleach and it turned white. And finally, medical procedures is when you have a treatment. For example, the treatment repaired the torn ligament so John can run again. Anything the doctor does to you is a treatment. Here's another example. This deer needs to be treated quietly or it will run away. In fact, the deer will always run away unless it's been fed by humans regularly. The next example is authorize. Authorize means to give power for action or agreeing to an action. For example, Mr. Juniper was authorized to go to the bank on behalf of XYZ company. Now, if he's authorized to go to the bank, it means the company, XYZ company, has given him the power to go to the bank for XYZ company. The next example is the trader called his broker and authorized him to sell stocks. If the trader wants to sell stocks, he can call his broker, and if he says, hey broker, I want you to sell my 100 shares of Microsoft, I authorize you to do it. So the trader authorized the broker. The authorization of the president's power caused uproar. So if the president is given too much power, if he's authorized to do too much stuff, it might cause uproar. People might get angry. Now, here's a caption. The photographer was authorized to take pictures of the dinosaur bones. Torrid means subject to intense heat. For example, the torrid aluminum plant is unbearable for some workers. It also means burning or hot. The sun is torrid today. Or it means intense. The torrid love story ended in Mr. Frankel being left alone crying. Well, that's a common sight, isn't it? Anyway, the torrid aluminum plant would mean the very, very, very hot aluminum plant. Similarly, Canadians love to eat torrid hot dogs because of their highly processed, greasy texture and quick cooking time. Yes, it's the most convenient way to become unhealthy. People eat hot dogs all the time. I, quite frankly, would think that this is not food, this is just some sort of garbage. If you look at this again, you can see that the most pivotal point in Canadian history is the most important change that happened, or at least one of the most important changes that happened, was this War of 1812. Dissension between the British Empire and the United States resulted in war. That means Britain and the United States disagreed on territory and the treatment of natives. The treatment of natives was how the natives are interacting with the British Empire and the United States. They could not agree, so they decided to have a war, which was very common back then to have wars over anything. And you see this word privateers? These people were like, they had ships and they would fight other ships, but they weren't working necessarily for the government. They were just working for themselves, and they were authorized by the government. The government allowed them to fight on the government's behalf. Now, the Canadians are proud of their most torrid accomplishment, their hot accomplishment, burning down the United States Capitol. Well, they didn't really burn it down, they just kind of burnt the inside, but they were very proud when they did that. Now, if we go to this Trans-Canada Railroad, we can see a picture here of the last spike in the railroad. And why don't I read this, and we can go over the words. So the construction of the Trans-Canada Railroad brought the colony, British Columbia, into Canada. The people wanted a railroad across the country to prevent the Americans from claiming the land. Surveying the land took 10 years, starting in 1871. The entire railroad was finished in 1886. The construction had many casualties, most of whom were Chinese workers who were underpaid. The railroad is still in heavy use, with a multitude of trains using it to move cargo. So here you can see, well, this was the last day of the production of the railroad. And so this guy here is Donald Smith. He's pretending to drive the final spike. Well, okay, he put a spike in. It's a gold spike, right? And this guy's a banker. He used to be on the Bank of Montreal board of directors, and then he was the president of the Bank of Montreal. So he was a rich man, and he was involved with planning and sort of financing this project, so he got himself in the picture, even though he didn't really do any of the work. And that's how many people died, you know? How many Chinese people had to die? It was, for every mile of track produced, it was 4 Chinese died, like in explosions and rocks falling and starving and stuff. So, you know, taking a picture like this is kind of self-indulgent, I think. Anyway, let's go over these two words, casualties and multitude. The first one is casualty. A casualty is a military person who is killed, lost, or injured, or a person who's dead from an accident such as a fire or collision. So, for example, the Afghanistan war has suffered many casualties. I should say caused many casualties. The Afghanistan war has caused many casualties. That would mean people have been killed, injured, or captured by enemy forces. This whole war is a stupid thing. Anyway, the only casualty of the house fire was the cat. So if the only person who died was the cat, that's the only casualty. New body armor reduces casualties in the army. That means if you have the better armor, you don't get shot as much, and maybe you won't die. Now, the forest of northern Alberta is a casualty of the oil sand development, because what they do is they cut down all the trees and they just kind of rip up the entire area and extract the oil, or it's tar, bitumen, from the sand, and then it's kind of a barren mess with polluted water after. Why don't we go to the next slide? Multitude. Multitude means many. That's it. The rising Canadian dollar has a multitude of causes, from high oil prices to foreign investment coming into Canada, making the dollar go up. The multitude of people have substantial debts and do not have savings in case of money problems. So we're saying the majority of people, or the common people, That's another way to use multitude is the common people, because common people is the most people. Now here's a picture of a sunflower. One crop, sunflower, has a multitude of uses: oil, protein bars, and decoration, to name a few. So they take these seeds, and there's many different uses for those seeds. Here, we used it to say a multitude of trains using the railroad to move cargo. So when we say casualties, we're saying the Chinese workers were killed or injured building this railroad. It's that time again for our fluency practice. Our key words today are pivotal, treatment, dissension, authorize, torrid, casualty, and multitude. Canada has a multitude of regions and cities with different weather and economies in each one. The torrid summers are treated with caffeine-rich, fat-induced, iced coffee from Tim Hortons. A pivotal moment in Tim Hortons' business was the invention of the Timbit. This invention authorized the company to sell garbage as food. One casualty of the popularity of Timbits is the rising obesity rate. However, there is no dissension among Canadians with regards to Tim Hortons. Anyone who bashes this restaurant is deemed a traitor, coward, and possibly an American spy. Here's the Timbits, also called donut holes. Now, I would never put one of these things in my mouth, let alone eat one, because all it is flour and genetically modified, processed, hydrogenized oil coated with genetically modified sugar and sitting on a shelf for a few hours to sort of, soak up all the air in Tim Hortons. And this is garbage. Don't eat this stuff. Anyway, so this is pretty awesome, right? Maybe I should explain, or maybe I should not explain and just go to the questions. What is a casualty of oil sands production? Cars that go fast, more oil for fueling trains, or forests? Well, the only one that dies from oil sands would be the forests. These would be beneficiaries of oil production. Would be trains and cars would be beneficiaries of oil production. Awesome. You're learning lots here. Wicked. Okay. Number 2. Who is dissident of Tim Hortons? Nobody. 10% of people who work at Starbucks, or only Canadians who cannot read? The answer is nobody. Nobody is dissident of Tim Hortons. Except me, maybe. I only have tea. When I go to Tim Hortons, I have green tea, small, $1.16. Yeah. Okay. Number 4. If I authorize Tom to sell my donuts, Tom will go to jail if he sells them. Tom can sell them, or Tom is a casualty of donuts. Well, that means that Tom can sell them if he is authorized to sell the donuts. All right, wicked. Number 4. Which one is the most torrid? A fresh hamburger, the sun, or iced coffee? The one that's the most hot would be the sun. Thank you for watching.